My mom sold my childhood dog to buy my sister an iPhone, so I bought a house, a new dog, and never gave her my new address. I'm a 26-year-old guy, and I've always had a deep bond with animals, especially my childhood dog, Max. Max wasn't just a pet. He was my best friend. We met when I was 8, and from the moment I saw him, I knew he'd be the one constant in a world that often felt chaotic and unpredictable. He was small, energetic, and had this mischievous way of making everything feel better, even during the hardest times. Growing up, my family wasn't exactly the picture of warmth. My mom was, well, let's just say she had a knack for making everything about her. She was manipulative, always playing favorites, and no matter what, my younger sister was her golden child. My sister Emily was spoiled beyond belief, but even though she was always the center of attention, she seemed harmless enough at first. It was my mom, though, who drove the wedge deeper, constantly emphasizing how everything needed to be for the baby girl, and how her happiness came first. Those words became a haunting mantra in our house. Max, on the other hand, was the only one who ever made me feel truly seen. He was there for me when I was locked in my room, hearing my mom's condescending praise for Emily. He was there when I sat in silence at the dinner table, feeling like the invisible one. Max didn't care about any of that. He just wanted to be with me. But the cracks started to show as I got older. Mom's control over Emily grew stronger, and my place in the family seemed to shrink more every day. The tension in the house wasn't subtle anymore. Mom's comments would sneak through, little jabs that made it clear where her loyalty lay. What does Max need? He's not important. Emily's happiness is. And yet, I never imagined the person I trusted most could trade my entire childhood happiness for a phone. Things started to get worse when I was 16. That's when my mom made it clear, without a doubt, that Emily's desires would always come before mine. I'd been saving up for a used car, hoping I could finally get some independence, but I never expected what came next. One day, Mom sat me down, that same cold, calculating look in her eyes. She told me that Emily had wanted the latest phone, a ridiculously expensive model that had just come out. "We can't afford both," she said, "so we'll just have to get it for her." "You can wait." I remember looking at her, trying to wrap my head around it. I had been working my part-time job for over a year, scraping together every penny for that car. I was almost there, just a couple of $100 away. But Emily's phone was more important. "Everything needs to be for her," she added, as if I didn't already know. "Her happiness is what matters most." I was numb. For the first time in years, Max wasn't there to comfort me. He was lying by the door, as he always did, but it didn't feel the same. My mom had crossed a line. She always made excuses for Emily, but this time it felt personal. It felt like she was telling me, once and for all, that I didn't matter, that my dreams were secondary. As the weeks passed, my resentment grew. I kept watching Emily strut around with her new phone, laughing and texting away, while I stayed stuck, unable to get out. Max stayed by my side like he always did, but even he couldn't erase the feeling of betrayal gnawing at me. Then, a few months later, the incident happened that would change everything. The incident I'm talking about happened right after Christmas. Mom had promised me that if I did well on my finals, she'd help me buy the car. I had worked so hard that semester, staying up late, pushing myself to the limit just to prove that I could earn it on my own. But once again, everything came down to Emily. She was upset because she didn't get a gift she wanted, a luxury item I can't even remember now. Instead of letting it go, she stormed through the house, throwing a tantrum, and of course, my mom caved in. She made a few calls and bought whatever it was Emily had demanded. I stood there, silent, fists clenched, watching her. I could feel the heat of my anger rising, but I stayed still. I was so used to this by now. Emily's wants always came first. I was always the one left to pick up the pieces, the one to swallow my feelings. Later that night, after Emily had calmed down and everyone was asleep, I went into the living room to find Max. I needed comfort. He was always there, his small body curling up against mine like he could somehow absorb all the hurt I couldn't voice. But this time, I found something that made my heart stop. There, lying on the couch, was Max's old collar, the one I'd had engraved for him when I was younger. It was scratched and worn, the leather fading from years of love. But next to it was something else, Emily's new phone, the one that had taken my car money. Mom had given it to her as a consolation prize for her meltdown, I realized. The same phone that I had seen her flaunting. I felt my stomach twist. That was it. My loyalty, my childhood, my heart, they meant nothing next to a material possession. I didn't know what to feel anymore. Betrayal, rage, or just numbness. But I wasn't going to sit back and let it all happen without saying something. I was tired of being invisible. Tired of being the backup plan when the real priorities failed. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Max's love or my own be a bargaining chip anymore. The next few days felt like a blur. I walked around the house like a ghost, trying to keep my emotions buried under a thick wall. But the betrayal was eating at me, gnawing deeper and deeper each time I saw Emily flaunt that damn phone or heard Mom praise her for being such a good girl. It was like they were all in on it together, a twisted little club that I wasn't allowed to be a part of. I remember one afternoon, Mom asked me to help Emily set up her new phone. The audacity of it. There I was, the one who'd been pushed aside for the last decade, now helping the very person who had stolen my chance at anything of my own. I forced a smile, the kind I had perfected over the years to hide how much I was hurting. I didn't say a word as I handed her the phone, but inside I was seething. Every tap of the screen felt like a slap in my face. Every call she made on it was a reminder of how much I had sacrificed just to stay invisible. The real blow came the next weekend, when I overheard a conversation between my mom and Emily. I wasn't supposed to be eavesdropping, but I couldn't help it. The words cut through the air like a knife. "You know," Mom said, "I've been thinking. Maybe it's time to start looking for a new home for Max. He's getting old, and he's been more trouble than he's worth lately." I froze. My heart sank to the pit of my stomach. It was like all the air had been sucked out of the room. They were talking about giving Max away. The dog who had been my only real friend, my constant through all the heartbreak, the one creature who had never judged me or let me down, he was now expendable. "He's not a little kid's pet anymore," Mom continued, her voice dripping with indifference. "He doesn't really fit into this family's plans anymore." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were made of lead as I staggered back to my room, closing the door behind me. I locked it, throwing myself onto my bed, Max's collar still hanging on the bedpost. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to hold it together. But I couldn't anymore. This was the final straw. The moment I had been dreading, the moment I had fought against for years, it was happening. I couldn't let it happen. I wouldn't. Max didn't deserve this. He never had. But as much as I tried to think of a plan, to figure out what I could do, one truth kept echoing in my head. I was fighting a battle I had already lost. The days that followed felt like I was walking through a fog. My mom's words kept circling in my mind. Maybe it's time to find a new home for Max. I couldn't escape them. Every time I looked at him, I felt this heavy weight pressing on my chest, knowing that I was losing the one thing in my life that had ever been truly mine. The one thing that loved me without condition, without expectation. And now, even that was being taken away. I kept my distance from Mom and Emily, avoiding eye contact, retreating into my room whenever I could. But every time I saw Max sitting there, his little tail wagging when I came home, I knew I couldn't just sit back and let them take him. I needed a plan. I needed to fight for him, the way I should have fought for myself all these years. It was late one night when I made my decision. I was sitting on the couch, Max curled up at my feet, the weight of my thoughts making it hard to focus. I scrolled through my phone, not really seeing anything until I stumbled on an old post from a local animal rescue group. They were looking for foster homes for senior pets, specifically dogs like Max, dogs who were often overlooked because of their age. It was the perfect solution. I could get Max out of this toxic environment, give him a loving home where he could spend his final years peacefully without the constant threat of being replaced or pushed aside. But there was a catch. I couldn't just tell Mom. I knew that if I gave her any warning, she'd shut it down. She'd find a way to manipulate the situation, twist it so she could still have control. I had to do this quietly. I made the call the next morning. I didn't tell anyone, not even Max, what was coming. I arranged a pickup for later that week when Mom and Emily would be out running errands. I knew it was risky, but at that point, I didn't care. I couldn't lose him. When the day finally came, everything seemed to fall into place. I barely breathed as I watched the rescue van pull up outside our house. My hands were shaking as I opened the door and led Max outside for the last time, his collar still in place, just as it had always been. He didn't know what was happening, didn't understand that this was his chance for a better life, one away from the suffocating hold of my mother's favoritism. I gave him one last pat on the head, whispering to him, "I'll always love you, buddy." He looked up at me with those trusting eyes, completely unaware of what I was doing. I led him into the van, my heart breaking with each step, but I knew it was for the best. Just as the van drove off, my phone buzzed with a message from Emily. "Where's Max?" My throat tightened. I couldn't bring myself to reply, not yet. The silence between us had finally broken, but it wasn't the kind of answer I was ready to give. The days after I sent Max away felt surreal. I kept expecting him to walk through the door, his little tail wagging and his eager eyes looking up at me like nothing had changed. But he didn't, and every time I realized that, a sharp pain shot through my chest. I had done the right thing for him. I had saved him from a life of being treated like nothing more than a burden. But in doing so, I had sacrificed the one thing that had given me a sense of purpose in this broken family. I didn't tell Mom or Emily where Max had gone. The rescue had promised to keep everything confidential, and I intended to keep it that way. But that didn't mean they weren't asking questions. Emily was relentless. She started asking about him every day, subtly at first, just casually mentioning, "Have you seen Max?" Or, "What happened to him?" It was clear she noticed his absence, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything. She didn't deserve to know. Neither of them did. A week later, when Mom had finally returned home from a shopping trip, she cornered me in the kitchen. I had been washing dishes, trying to lose myself in the familiar routine. But there was no escaping her this time. "Where is he?" she asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. "Where's who?" I feigned ignorance, still scrubbing the same plate over and over again, not looking her in the eye. "Max," she snapped. "I know something's going on." "Don't lie to me," I froze. My grip on the plate tightened. She was like a predator, waiting for the moment when I'd crack. "I don't know what you're talking about," I muttered, turning to the sink to avoid her gaze. "Don't play games with me," Mom said, her voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "If you've done something with Max, you better tell me now. He was part of this family." That hit me like a punch to the gut. Part of the family? Max had been the only one who ever made me feel like I belonged. I didn't do anything to him," I said quietly, barely able to speak the words. I had no choice now but to lie. "He was just getting old. It was time to let him go." Her face twisted in frustration. "You think you can just get rid of him? You think I'm not going to find out? He was my dog, too. You can't make decisions like that without telling me. You think you can do whatever you want, don't you?" The words stung, but they didn't have the power they once did. She could shout and blame me all she wanted. The truth was, I was done. I wasn't the same person who had lived under her control. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Max is gone, Mom, and I'm not sorry for it." Her face paled, and for a moment I thought she might explode. But instead, she took a breath, held it, and then let it out in a long, defeated sigh. "You're making a huge mistake," she muttered. "You've ruined everything." I wasn't sure if she meant Max or me, or both. But in that moment, I realized something. I had spent years allowing my family's manipulation to define who I was. I had let their toxic behavior shape my world, even when it meant losing myself in the process. But Max had always shown me that love didn't have to be conditional. He had loved me when no one else had. And that was enough. Mom was right about one thing. I had ruined everything. But in the best way possible. I wasn't going to play their game anymore. I was going to live my life on my terms. As I turned away from her, I felt the weight of everything. Years of sacrifice, of being unseen, of giving my heart away to people who never deserved it, finally start to lift. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking it alone. After that day, the tension in the house was unbearable. It felt like an unspoken wall had gone up between me and Mom, between me and Emily. I didn't know how to fix things or if I even wanted to anymore. My decision had been made. I had cut ties with the one thing in my life that had always been a source of warmth, and for the first time, I was free. But that freedom came with a cost. A week passed, and I could feel the change in the air. Every conversation felt forced, every glance laden with resentment. Mom didn't speak to me unless she absolutely had to, and Emily acted like I didn't even exist. She kept sending me these subtle jabs, texts, Facebook messages, and little comments when we passed in the hall. "Max wouldn't have left if you loved him as much as you say you do," she said one night, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how little she understood about sacrifice, about love. But instead, I let her words bounce off me. The more she spoke, the more I realized she didn't know what it meant to love unconditionally. She had never had to fight for anything. She had always been handed everything, every need met without question. Then came the text I had been dreading. It was from the animal rescue group. A simple message, no extra details, just a few words. "Max has been adopted into a new home. He's doing great. Thank you for making the right choice for him." I stared at the screen for a while, my heart pounding in my chest. I had done it. Max was in a better place. He was safe, loved, and he wasn't being used as a pawn in the twisted games my family had played for years. But as I stared at the message, something inside me felt hollow. I had freed him, yes, but I had also left a piece of myself behind. I had given up my last connection to a world that had been cold and lonely for so long. I didn't know if I would ever fully heal from that. But I had to remind myself that it was the right thing for him, and in the end, that's what mattered. The next day, Mom came to me with a look I couldn't quite place. She was holding something in her hands, Max's old collar, the one I had engraved with his name when I was younger. "Here," she said, tossing it at me. "You may have given him away, but at least keep this. It's the only thing left to remind you of what you destroyed." I held the collar in my hand, running my fingers over the faded leather. 1,000 memories rushed back to me, of nights curled up on the couch with Max, of playing fetch in the yard, of the quiet companionship we'd shared through the years. I wanted to say something to fight back, but the words wouldn't come. She didn't understand. She never would. "I didn't destroy anything, Mom," I finally said, my voice low but steady. "I saved him," and with that I turned and walked away. The silence between us was final. It felt like the end of something I had been holding on to for far too long. But I didn't look back. Max was gone, yes, but so was the hold my family had over me. I was free. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the smallest bit of peace. It's been 6 months since I sent Max away. 6 months of silence, of navigating a home where the only sounds were the echoes of past fights and the occasional cold exchange. But the world outside had changed too. Things that once felt impossible, like walking out of the suffocating grip of my family, had become the new normal. And somehow, in all the chaos, I had begun to rebuild my life. Max's absence still stings. I'll admit that. Every now and then, I find myself reaching for him without thinking, my hand brushing the empty space where he used to lie. But what I've learned in these months is that love doesn't always look the way we expect it to. I gave him the freedom he deserved, and though it hurt to let go, I know it was the right choice. Mom and Emily, they're still the same. Cold, distant, and wrapped up in their own world. I don't know if they ever truly understood why I did what I did, or if they even care. But the more I distanced myself, the more I realized I didn't need their approval anymore. I wasn't the person they had tried to mold me into for so many years. I was finally becoming my own. I haven't heard from Max since he was adopted, but I do think about him often. I wonder if he's happy, if he's found a new person to love him as fiercely as I did. Maybe it's selfish, but I hope so. I hope he's lying in someone's lap, getting all the love he could ever want, without the chaos of my family surrounding him. And for me, I've started looking for my own happiness. It's a strange thing, trying to find joy when you've spent so many years suppressing it. But I'm getting there. I've made new friends, people who actually see me. I'm working at a new job, one that feels fulfilling, where I don't have to apologize for existing. I've even started volunteering at the rescue where Max came from, trying to give back to the place that gave him a second chance. It's not perfect, and it doesn't erase the past, but it's progress. Every day feels like a small step away from the darkness that used to suffocate me, and toward a future where I'm in control. I'm still not sure if I'll ever truly forgive Mom or Emily for the way they treated me. Some wounds are too deep, too embedded in the years of manipulation. But I've stopped looking for their approval. I'm learning to give that to myself, and with that, I'm starting to heal. I'll always carry Max with me, even if he's not physically here anymore. He was my first lesson in unconditional love, and no matter how much time passes, that's something I'll never forget, and maybe, just maybe, that's enough. It's been almost a year now since I made the hardest decision of my life, sending Max to a new home. I still think about him every single day, but the ache is no longer a raw wound. It's become more of a dull, distant throb. Max was a part of me for so long, and even though he's gone, I've realized that his impact on my life is something I carry with me every day. I've moved on in ways I never thought possible. For the first time in years, I can breathe without feeling suffocated by the weight of my family's expectations. I found a rhythm in my life, one that doesn't revolve around appeasing my mom or trying to get Emily's approval. It feels freeing, like I've finally shed the skin of someone I never really wanted to be. I've met new people, people who value me for who I am, not who they want me to be. I've reconnected with parts of myself that I had forgotten even existed, the parts that used to laugh without worrying about who was watching, the parts that could dream without hearing the voice of my mother in the back of my mind telling me it wasn't possible. And in the midst of all this growth, I've started to understand something I never did before. Happiness doesn't come from other people. It doesn't come from trying to mold yourself into someone else's idea of what's right or acceptable. Happiness comes from within. It's a slow process, but I'm learning to appreciate it bit by bit. As for my relationship with Mom and Emily, it's still strained. There's an unspoken understanding between us now that we're all just playing our parts in this broken family drama. I've stopped trying to fix them or make them see things my way. I can't change them, and honestly, I've stopped wanting to. But I've found peace in accepting that they are who they are, and I am who I am. One evening, I found myself sitting in the park, watching the sunset. It's something I've come to cherish, the quiet moments when everything just feels still. I was lost in my thoughts when I saw a couple of kids playing with a dog, a small one, full of energy. It took me a moment to realize. This dog looked just like Max. I stood up, my heart racing. I couldn't help it. I walked over to them, and for the first time in a long time I felt a small spark of hope. "That's a beautiful dog," I said, smiling at the little creature. The kids beamed back at me, and we started talking about how they'd adopted him from the same rescue Max had gone to. They didn't know his story, but they could tell he was loved. As I stood there, talking to those kids, I realized something. Max had found a new life, a better life, one where he could be the center of someone's world, free from the chaos of my family. And in that moment, I felt something that had been missing for so long. Closure. I didn't need to be reminded of how much I missed him. I didn't need to feel guilty for letting him go, because Max had lived his life with me as his companion, and I had done everything I could to give him the best years I had to offer. And now, he was free, and so was I. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I finally felt a sense of peace settle into my heart. The journey wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I could look at the future with a sense of hope. Max had taught me that love isn't about holding on. Sometimes it's about letting go. It's been a few months since I had that moment in the park, and things have continued to evolve in ways I never expected. After Max's adoption, I took a step back and allowed myself to finally breathe without the weight of my past dragging me down. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living for myself. I wasn't trying to live up to anyone's expectations anymore. It wasn't just about not living for Mom or Emily. It was about figuring out who I actually was when I wasn't buried under their influence. For the longest time, I had convinced myself that I wasn't good enough, that I was always going to be the invisible, overlooked one. But the more time I spent by myself, the more I realized how much I had been missing out on by staying in that toxic environment. I had put my life on hold for so long. For family, for expectations, for guilt, but no more. The first step was confronting my fears. I finally took that trip I'd been talking about for years, the one I'd been too afraid to take because I was worried about leaving everyone behind. I drove across the country, stopping at places I had always dreamed of seeing, from the coastlines to the mountains. Every time I saw something beautiful, I thought about how far I had come. The girl who was afraid to leave home, afraid to take a chance, was no longer the person I recognized, but even with all this growth, there were moments when I would be lying awake at night, thinking about my family. I would wonder if they ever thought about me the way I thought about them. Did they miss me? Did they feel the same emptiness I had once felt, even though they'd never admit it? I finally accepted that I would never get those answers. I would never hear my mom apologize or have Emily acknowledge what she had done. And honestly, I was okay with that. I found myself letting go of the need for validation. There was freedom in accepting that not everyone would understand my choices, and not everyone would be capable of seeing things from my perspective. It was hard to do, but it was liberating too. One day, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a simple message from Emily. "I hope you're doing okay. I miss you." I stared at the screen for a long time, unsure of how to respond. I had spent years waiting for her to say something like that, to show me that maybe, just maybe, we could be a family again. But now, in this space of healing, I wasn't sure if I could go back to what we once had. Instead of responding right away, I put the phone down. I didn't feel that immediate rush to reply or fix things. I didn't need to prove anything. If we were ever going to rebuild anything, it had to be on my terms. A week later, I made the decision not to reply. I realized that what I had been craving for so long, acceptance, acknowledgement, was something I needed to give to myself first. I wasn't going to wait around for someone else's approval anymore. I had spent too long doing that. In that moment, I felt a peace I had never known before. I wasn't going to let anyone control my narrative anymore. Not my mom, not Emily, not anyone. For the first time in my life, I was writing my own story. I realized that true healing didn't come from fixing broken relationships or seeking approval. It came from within. It came from choosing yourself, even when it meant letting go of the things you thought you couldn't live without. And as I walked forward into the unknown, I knew that I was finally ready to live a life that was truly mine. A year has passed since that last message from Emily, and with each day, I feel further removed from the version of myself that used to seek validation from my family. I've learned that healing isn't linear. It's a process of constant discovery, sometimes messy, but always moving forward. Over time, I found myself in a place of deep acceptance. I stopped worrying about what my family thought. The constant noise, the manipulation, the toxicity, it no longer had the power to consume me. I learned to fill my life with things that actually brought me joy, not just things that kept me distracted. And, most importantly, I've learned to be okay with the silence. I've built a new kind of family, a chosen family. People who see me for who I am, not who they think I should be. They accept me fully, flaws and all. These are the people who show up when it matters, who ask how I'm doing, who listen without judgment. I finally know what it feels like to be seen and loved for myself. It wasn't easy, and there are still days when I find myself questioning the choices I've made. When doubt creeps in, or when I miss the simplicity of my childhood, when life seemed like it had endless possibilities. But those days are fewer now, and they don't last as long. I've learned to ride the waves of uncertainty without being swallowed by them. And then there's Max. It's strange. Even after everything, I still think about him all the time. The little dog who was my constant companion through the hardest parts of my life. Sometimes I catch myself imagining him running across a field, chasing a ball, his little tail wagging like crazy. I know he's safe, I know he's happy, and that brings me comfort. But sometimes there's this part of me that wishes he could have been here, to see how much I've grown, to see that I've finally found my footing in a world that used to feel so overwhelming.